Our theme this summer is Rock This Planet. We're going to take a look at how Jesus had a way of doing extraordinary things with ordinary people. And Peter was another ordinary person used by God in a big way. He was a fisherman that Jesus used to build his church.
As we jump into the week, we're going to talk about how Jesus gave Peter his name. He was originally called Simon, but Jesus changed it to Peter, which means rock. And as we set the week up, we're going to help kids discover each bottom line in the context of this next statement. When I believe Jesus is who he says he is, then I can. So let's get started with session 1. We'll talk about the calling of Peter in session 1 and how Peter dropped his fishing net and immediately followed Jesus. The bottom line for session 1 is, when I believe Jesus is who he says he is, then I can do whatever God is asking me to do.
And our next story is of Peter walking on the water. Well, for a few steps anyway, and then he started to sink. He took his eyes off of Jesus. He learned very quickly that he could do so much more with Jesus than he could do alone. Our bottom line for this session is when I believe Jesus is who he says he is, then I can do more than I can do on my own.
During the Last Supper, the events in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jesus' crucifixion, Peter went through some rough times. But through it all, Peter learned that Jesus is who he said he was. This session's bottom line is, when I believe Jesus is who he says he is, then I can keep believing even when things get hard.
And when Jesus rose from the dead, I'm sure Peter was so excited, but maybe a little worried. After all, he had denied knowing Jesus 3 times before his death.
Right.
But in this story, we're going to talk about Jesus forgiving Peter, even for denying him. We're going to learn in our bottom line that when I believe Jesus is who he says he is, then I can know God will never give up on me.
In Peter's sermon at Pentecost, he taught that even though Jesus left to prepare a place for us in heaven, he left the Holy Spirit to guide us. Our bottom line for session 5 is, when I believe Jesus is who he says he is, then I can know his Spirit is always in me.
Our last session takes us to the story of Peter and Cornelius, 2 men who weren't supposed to associate in that day and time.
Right.
But God put them together to further his plan. We'll walk away knowing that when I believe Jesus is who he says he is, then I can rock this planet by showing everyone his love and forgiveness.
Our memory verse for Rock This Planet is Philippians 1:27. No matter what happens, live in a way that brings honor to the good news about Christ. We can't wait to see you this summer at Camp KidJam.